All right, I think we're live. Mic check 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2. If anyone in the chat can hear me, just push 1. All right, thank you for the confirmation. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is Geopolitics. Please hit the like button as you come in. Share the video if possible. Hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, including those posted on the community tab. This should be episode 396. Just give me a second while I revise this. Let me give a shout out to people in the chat. Naima Buckner, good evening to you. Excalibur, what's going on? Adil Essek, what's going on? Jordan Zaiziv, what's going on? Terrence Forrest Jr., yo, and Farrell Edmondson. What's going on, Fair? We have to keep in mind that an impeachment doesn't necessarily mean that he has to leave. It's just meant to trash him. But I won't go into too much of it right now. Dalia, how are you doing? Good evening to you as well. If you want to engage in a discussion, there'll be a link in the chat for you to click on so you can get on the panel. When you get on the panel, make sure you raise your hand so that one of us can acknowledge you and advance you to the panel. There's a document description beneath the video for you to follow along with. Just give me a second while I do a quick update to the live stream. Cocaine Kells, good evening to you. Woman of the Past, good evening to you. Richard Victor Dixon, yo, what it do, what it do. All right, let's get started, man, because we're already late. Oh, come on, man. All right, this first one item on the docket is from the NewYorkTimes.com. Long lines as undocumented immigrants in New York rush to get licenses. New York's law allowing undocumented immigrants to obtain licenses went into effect on Monday, the same day New Jersey passed a similar bill. On the New York side of the Hudson River, lines outside some Department of Motor Vehicles offices stretched for blocks on Monday as people sought to take advantage of a new state law allowing undocumented immigrants to obtain driver's licenses. This is behind the paywall. We have a similar bill on the floor right now in Massachusetts, and I find it to be extremely racist. They did a study about a year or so ago, finding that Black men, by and large, have some of the highest traffic stops amongst all demographics of people. And the question was, well, why is that? It's because of the stop and frisk sort of policies, right? The sort of violation or the monitoring of Black men, right? Whether they're licensed or unlicensed, or they're walking or they're driving, there's some form of monitoring on citizens of the United States that happen to be Black men. And so because of that, there's been a lot of questions from places like the ACLU on civil rights violations of Black men. Now, what you have here are California, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, some of your most liberal states pushing for undocumented immigrants to get licensed in the same states where they over police Black males through policies like stop and frisk. So I say it's racist for a politician to, on one hand, push for undocumented immigrants to have the same privileges as a Black man who is a citizen of this country who's not even afforded the same privileges. I think that's very racist. We got Going 11 on the panel. What's going on, fam?
Oh, what's up, family? How you doing, man? Yeah, that's pretty true. You got undocumented immigrants coming in, and they're bringing them in as workers. That's really what's going on, and it's really the corporate side of the game that's pushing a lot of this.
Mm-hmm.
They talk out of both sides of their mouths, but this is really a profit market. You can come in here and get workers for cheap, and that's it. But yet they're going to over police us. Right. I mean, we beat a lot of that stop and frisk back in the city, New York City. We definitely went against that, but and we spoke up for sure, and we helped to turn a lot of that around. But that's something you have to definitely fight against. So it's just showing you kind of where the real loyalties lie. It's with the dollars, cheap immigrants, and it certainly isn't isn't in your favor. That's why we really have to, black men especially, we have to stay very vigilant, and very much on top of our game because, we have very few friends out here, or almost none at all. But anyway,
how do you ensure a undocumented immigrant, right? They don't have a social security number, they don't have proper documentation, but yet they're able to operate a vehicle without proper insurance. How do you insure a person like this?
Well, if they're driving vehicles for a company or something else like that, they have, common carriers insurance, that kind of thing, where you may be a common carrier for a trucking company, or something like that, and you can carry around goods. So ultimately, the shipment or whatever is insured and for a certain amount, and they may not worry so much about that person. But yet they could pay that undocumented person instead of paying like a really good CDL person, maybe 15 to 20 an hour. They can pay them less, $8-9 an hour, and move that just as good as far as they figure for less dough. And
wouldn't there be some form of I guess workers' rights or something like that? Because if
you're talking about a unionized movement, like with the AFL-CIO and these types of things that have been there. But the union movement has been cut back so heavily here in this country, and that's one of the big reasons why the Republicans and all them really started to cut back on some of the Rooseveltian policies since the 30s and really cut back on that to get it where it is right now. So you don't have a unionized market that really can sit down and talk about workers' rights and what they should get and insurances and everything else like that, and healthcare and all that, for the rights of the workers that basically here in this country is dying away. And, the corporatocracy has taken that over. And, you got a gig economy, everything else like that, where jobs and stuff are getting done. People are underinsured, they have no real rights. And, the union movement here in this country has been, for all practical purposes, or unionized, or the labor movement has been beaten back in this country. It has successfully been turned back over the last 60, 70 years. And it's been whittled away very rapidly, starting certainly in the late 70s, 80s, 90s. It was decimated. In the 2000s, we basically come in where it's where the union movement is practically, it's not non-existent, but it's very, very, very small. So that's one of the key factors here, which has driven a lot of what goes on in this country, even the racial game. When we sit back and we talk about the general strike of New Orleans back in 1892, where this was a worker strike where it was interracial, and you had the big three protagonists that were fighting against it. You had the workers, the railroad folks, and so forth, that they really joined up together to fight against the corporatocracy at that stage. That was really trying to take over and literally knock you out of your workers' rights, of which interracial movement came about and really helped to knock a lot of that back. What we saw out of that was the Jim Crow laws and everything else like that. It came out of there and went enterprise-wide around, and racism and all that kind of stuff really was pushed very heavily. Not so much because they really hated you for your race, but the corporatocracy didn't want you to regulate how much they would make. So they made sure we were at each other's throats, and they walked away with all the money, and that has worked. Where we look at right now, the massive amount of profits that the super rich have garnered, and the plutocracy have taken over, and the smaller amounts of dollars that we see from the general working person, this imbalance has been massive, and it's been a steady stripping away of this. So much of your racism and separation of people and everything else of that nature is built around organized labor. And that's one of the big connections that people haven't seen. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now immigrant workers and so forth are playing a very key part in that role. Mm-hmm. And we, once again, are taking it on the chin underneath that. And we have classically always have. And that's our classical role is still there in this regard. So, just giving a slight little historical breakdown, but that's where it is. That's where we are. And it's relevant today as it was back in the late 19th century. And here we are in its apex, where we're seeing the super wealthy, very small amount of people, 625 people, families own more than, say, 150 million people here in this country. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But that's what's going on. And that's what you're seeing. And that's what this immigrant piece is all about.
Yeah. Terrence Forrest Jr. in the chat says, he says, exactly, I work in insurance. This risk would be uninsurable if they wanted to be insured individually. And see, that's the problem I have. I got rear-ended by a undocumented immigrant about a year or so ago. And, this guy tried to take off on me because he was undocumented. So I had to call the police. Point of the matter here is that there is a strong movement with politicians in this sort of way of not employing Black males, but actually wanting to employ other groups of people and who don't even have citizenship here, right? I mean, now it's licenses. Tomorrow it's going to be voting privileges, right? You'll be able to vote in local elections because you live there. It's really it really speaks volumes about the temperature in the climate within, politically speaking, within some of these blue states. All the more reason why Black men should actually organize politically and actually get something done. The manosphere is the first phase. The next step is to take it further.
It's very important we get organized. I mean, the whole Pullman Porter deal, Black men got together and we're sleeping car attendants and so forth, and they unionized. Yep. These brothers organized, unionized, and that's what the railroads were trying to shut you down, but they unionized and they were able to not only maintain their jobs but get higher pay and getting certain level of benefits, and that's what's going on. But the union movement has been basically gutted in this country, and that's why they're able to do what they want. And they can have illegal, undocumented workers with driver's licenses moving product around this country.
Oh yeah,
and you can't do nothing about it. It's crazy.
Yeah, crazy. We get to the next item on the docket, but I want to bring up one more point too. The brother in South Carolina who was shot in the back by Michael Slager, I think that's his name. Let me make sure I get his name right.
Yeah, who's doing 20 years right now?
Yeah. Actually, we can use something a little bit more recent. Philando Castile was pulled over 46 times before he was killed. Right.
And remember, he was licensed. Remember, he was licensed, a licensed gun carrier, and licensed driver, and a licensed gun carrier. Licensed. Right. Remember that.
Right. That's my point. That's my point. Right. He was pulled over 46 times before he was killed. It's really it really gets on my nerves, makes my blood boil when I hear these type of justifications to for undocumented workers or immigrants and things of that nature to have access to the same privileges that Black men themselves do not have in the 21st century. In 2019, you have people debating this. How can you even debate this? His name was Walter Scott in South Carolina. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
He got pulled over for a broken taillight. You see these sort of cases, even Sandra Bland, right? She was pulled over for not using her blinker. So there's this sort of overarching reach of the judicial system on Black people, but when it comes to other people, it's like, well, we got to let him go because he's he's moving milk and eggs or something like that in a vehicle or something like that. So
yeah, really, there's also a large economic component. It's a major racial component and an economic component. Most of these undocumented workers, if they're driving around some truck, I mean, just go out to Oxnard, California. Go out there and just go out to their strawberry fields and stuff like that, where they're picking all kinds of fruits for companies like Dannon and so forth. All these different companies that literally buy these fruits out of these large growers. Who's doing all that? These Mexicans who are coming through. The Mexican workers. They're driving around, hauling around major bales of product. They're not getting pulled over.
Yeah,
they ain't getting pulled over.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even so much that little Mexicali that's sitting behind the truck driving it, but who's he driving for? That's what you got to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's ill. It's ill game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Next item on our docket is from USAtoday.com. 92% of Americans think their basic rights are being threatened. New poll shows. Most Americans surveyed, 92% think their rights are under siege, according to a poll released Monday. Americans are most concerned that their freedom of speech, 48%, right to bear arms, 47%, and right to equal justice, 41%, are at risk, says the Harris Poll Purple Project, which surveyed 2,002 people nationwide. When you frame something as a threat, it creates a bit of political response, and it creates division and encampments of special interests, said John Gerzima, CEO of the Harris Poll. That's why political parties and lobbying groups warn supporters with strident language. He said, it's easier to drum up backing for a political cause by talking about an issue in terms of threats. But when you start to consider which rights and freedoms really matter, Gerzima said, poll responses change, and Americans reprioritize which values they cared about most. When asked what rights and freedoms Americans would miss if they were taken away rather than which ones are threatened, poll respondents' concern generally ticked upward. 63% said they would miss freedom of speech if that right was taken away, while nearly half would miss freedom of expression and the right to equal justice, 45%. When you look at things the things we really value, what makes America so special is these core tenets of our Constitution, Gerzima said. I just find it interesting to know how much Americans really value this. The poll results come at a juncture in American politics where friction and division are more apparent, and Americans are overwhelmingly frustrated by the discourse. In fact, another recent survey, a Public Agenda USA Today Ipsos poll, shows that the divisive national debate over just about everything has convinced many that the country is headed in the wrong direction. More than 9 of 10 in that poll said it's crucial for the U.S. to try to reduce that divisiveness. Even among Americans with opposing political views, a majority surveyed in the Harris Poll Purple Project, 55% want more meaningful conversations. How can this be done? Talking about issues in a way that de-escalates tensions from a threat and helps Americans find common ground, Gerzima said. So does finding common ground on shared values and freedoms, both at the dinner table and between the political aisle, he said. Even if Americans don't agree on a contentious, politically charged topic, they can find shared values and things that Americans tend to take for granted, he said. After all, only 16% of Americans thought their right to own property was under threat, but 44% would miss that right. Same goes for free speech, which 63% said they would miss if it was gone. 15% more than felt free speech was at risk of being taken away. So I think this is interesting because they talk about, having more meaningful conversation. I watched an Al Jazeera interview. They were interviewing people during the Trump's first campaign, and they interviewed this white woman, and they were talking about police brutality. And this white woman said that police brutality is not a major concern, for Americans. But which Americans was she referring to? Right? It was this attitude that says that I'll determine what's meaningful and what's not meaningful, and you just accept whatever it is that we set course or set the pace on the discussion. And so I don't think they're really interested in having a meaningful discussion. I think what they consider to be meaningful is going back, pre-1965. I think that's what they want.
They want no parts of a meaningful discussion. No parts of that. No parts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of the values that they're talking about weren't even, most Black people have never really received those sort of values. I mean, it's still Black people from the 1970s and the political movements, from the Black Panthers that are incarcerated right now. Most of them died in jail. What kind of freedoms did they get? Where were their human rights or their constitutional rights?
Most of them, like when you look at many of the Panthers, that were arrested, just look at many of them are still political prisoners because a lot of them were kind of arrested illegally. Just look at the whole Fred Hampton thing when they just invaded that area and just shot them down. They, no warning, no anything. They just came in, nobody was threatened, and they just came in firing, killing people. It's crazy. So most of that was just illegal activity. They're still in jail illegally. These are political prisoners. These guys are in the gulag, are in an American gulag.
All right, let me get to this next article. This one is from Forbes.com. The U.S. Let me expand this out. This is kind of small. The U.S. Navy's new Orca drone submarine could get an offensive role. So this is a picture of the submarine. U.S. Navy's Boeing Orca underwater drone could play an offensive role in future conflicts. Right in the highly regarded U.S. Naval Institute blog, retired Commander Brian Diller argues that the U.S. Navy should invest in mine-laying capabilities. It's an arena where large drones like the Orca could have advantages. This is a very deadly piece of weaponry. Mine warfare feels neglected in the popular defense media. It may be perceived as old-fashioned or uninteresting. The reality can be quite different. Put yourself in the mind of a captain whose ship has just strayed into a minefield, or the explosive ordnance disposal divers sent to defuse the mines. Even low-tech or vintage mines pose a very real threat to modern navies. Commander Duller's mine proposal is innovative, yet like many good ideas, it will seem obvious when you read it. He proposes to combine the, this is poorly written. He proposes to combine the range, autonomy, and flexibility of a UUV, unmanned underwater vehicle, with the warhead of a mine. This allows it to be used as a moored mine that can propel itself into position, keeping the launch platform far from harm's way. It could also be used as an extra slow torpedo to target ships in harbor. Because of its combined features, Duller terms the concept of the Morpedo. All this at the same time, underwater drones are a hot topic for the Navy. It's a natural pairing because mine laying is dangerous to perform, especially in the enemy's backyard. Aircraft, ships, and submarines are put in harm's way and distracted from their primary purposes. Crewless platforms mitigate some of the inherent risk involved. Although unmanned air vehicles, UAVs, have become a common sight on the battlefield, development has been slower in the undersea domain. And until now, the majority of UUVs used by navies have been very small. To lay a minefield, a UUV would have to be much larger, large enough to carry a usable number of mines. Not surprisingly, the US is the first sea power to start building extra large unmanned underwater vehicles, XLUUVs. But other navies are also entering the arena, including Britain and Japan. And China, Russia, and South Korea also have large UUV projects. Della proposes that the Navy's large displacement drones, LD UUV, could be employed. The Orca design will be even larger and therefore could patrol further and could carry more. The Orca is up to 85 feet long, in order of a magnitude larger than anything else out there at the moment. It has a flexible payload section, which is large enough to carry multiple torpedo-sized payloads. Initially, these could be smaller UUVs. In the future, they could be Tomahawk cruise missiles, or as the USNI article implies, mines. The Russians have been talking about doing this for quite some time. The idea of creating a tidal wave, on the shore of their adversary and creating a flood is far more dangerous than what the U.S. is talking about doing with these UUVs, these XL UUVs. It doesn't surprise me that that's how they're thinking about unmanned underwater vehicles. But the thing is, you have to get past all of their defense systems, and in this case, something like this would never be able to make it past because you have planes and helicopters that scour their ocean, their weak points are in their blue water. So in that regard, this thing is so massive in size that it would behoove any sort of navy or maritime security to actually to continuously look for something like this. It wouldn't be difficult to find it either, because if you have all the electronic equipment in place, this would be relatively easy to find at 85 feet long. I mean, it's the size of a small vessel. So if you have underwater beacons and things like that, sensors and stuff like that in place, that this thing is not going to get that far into the into enemy territory. All right, let me jump to the next article. All right, this one is from CNN.com. China's first domestically built aircraft carrier officially enters service. China has officially commissioned its first domestically built aircraft carrier, the Shandong, a significant step forward in Chinese President Xi Jinping's ambitions for the country to field a world-class navy. Xi attended the commissioning ceremony in the southern province of Henan Tuesday, according to state-run media, where the Shandong finally entered service as part of the People's Liberation Navy. According to state-run news agency Xinhua, Xi presented a Chinese flag and a certificate with the ship's official name to the ship's captain and political commissioner. The Shandong, which uses conventional rather than nuclear propulsion, is the second carrier in the Chinese fleet. China's first aircraft carrier, the Liaoning, a retrofitted Soviet-era vessel, was purchased from the Ukrainian government in 1998. Both the Liaoning and the Shandong used skip jump style ramps at the end of the flight deck to launch planes, a comparatively older technology compared to the United States Navy's preferred catapult technology. Aircraft launched by catapults can get airborne quicker with greater quantities of fuel and ammunition, giving them the advantage over Chinese planes, which rely on their own power when lifting off the ski jumps. The aircraft carrier name was officially announced on Tuesday. Before then, it had only been known as Type 0018. Both of China's aircraft carriers, the Shandong and the Liaoning, are named after coastal provinces close to Beijing. According to Peter Layton, visiting fellow at the Griffith Asia Institute, the Liaoning was intended to act as more of a training vessel, whereas the Shandong is likely to be deployed in combat missions, positioning China alongside a select number of countries with global naval capabilities, including Russia, France, the US, and the United Kingdom. The official launch of the carrier comes just a month after Chinese Defense Minister Wei Feng told his US counterpart Mark Esper that Washington must stop flexing its muscles in the South China Sea. Naval competition between the two countries has increased in recent years amid a sweeping Chinese moderation drive that has seen Beijing launch more submarines, warships, amphibious vessels, and auxiliaries since 2014 than the entire serving navies of Germany, India, Spain, Taiwan, and the United Kingdom. China has the second largest military budget in the world, behind only the US. Speaking at a mass naval parade in the South China Sea in April 2018, Xi said People's Liberation Navy needed to become a world-class force. There are 7 suggestions that the Chinese Navy may be already building its third aircraft carrier at a naval base in Shanghai, which will likely be more technologically advanced than both its sister ships. The Shandong was launched to much fanfare in April 2017, before being sent to sea trials just over a year later in 2018. That is really fucking fast. The new aircraft carrier took slightly longer to finish its sea trials than its sister ship, the Liaoning, which experts said may have been due to the unexpected difficulties of building and outfitting the complex vessel from scratch. I think the politicians in the Chinese Communist Party didn't really comprehend the challenges of acquiring a carrier, said Malcolm Davis, a senior analyst in defense strategy and capability at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. The Liaoning was relatively easy, but the Type 0018 and the vessels that follow her will be much more complex. I think the Chinese have got their work cut out for them. So the reason why I said that was really fast was because you're talking a year and a half of building. That means they ran 3 shifts a day for 7 days a week. In the U.S., you don't really do things like that. You kind of wait it out. Most carriers take anywhere between 5 to 7 years to build. At least now they do. And so the U.S. has about 15 of them. However, that most of them are not even in working function right now. The point that I'm making here is that even if it does have data technology in terms of a skip ramp, that's remarkably fast for any sort of country to build a aircraft carrier that quickly, much less a warship, a regular warship. I mean, we read an article months ago that said that China was putting out 34 warships a year. Minus the aircraft carrier. So that means they're putting out corvettes and frigates like crazy. Unprecedented. Never seen anything like that before. That's not to mention what their coastal vessels are, and littoral combat ships. The ones that carry the helicopters and jump jets and things like that. Hospital ships. They didn't even talk about that, at least to my knowledge. All right, let me get to the next article. All right, this one's from Forbes.com. The Chinese Navy is building an incredible number of warships. We just talked about this. While the U.S. Let me expand this out. While the U.S. Navy launches a handful of Aegis destroyers each year, the single image below of a Shanghai shipyard shows 9 newly constructed Chinese warships. Chinese Navy, known as the PLAN, People Liberation Army Navy, is modernizing at an impressive rate and on a vast scale. A key ingredient is the construction of a fleet of large destroyers, amphibious warships, and aircraft carriers. The below photo snapped from an airplane window on December 13th and shared on social media captures the vast scale of the construction. This is massive, but photo A image A shows a Type 052D air defense destroyer. B shows a 055 air defense destroyer. C shows a hovercraft for amphibious ships. And D shows aircraft carrier construction. And E shows a missile test tracking ship.
Hey, Mike.
Sir.
What do you think, listening to all this, and I've just been just kind of taking some of the stuff in here. How do you square this with the Pilger documentary?
Oh, it fits right in line. I think this is, a continuation. The news is a continuation and confirmation of what John Pilger was talking about in his documentary, The Coming War on China. I think it's almost time, maybe next year, you should probably start working on a part 2, a follow-up to that documentary. Because where he left off at, the Chinese were not doing any of this. They were not ramping up like this photo is showing. Anyone who thinks that the Chinese are sitting around just making iPhones and TVs and whatnot and cheap goods, you would be a fool to think so. They are ramping up big time. They're getting prepared for something.
Could this be a prelude to war?
Absolutely. You don't build this many warships just to sit around and go fishing, man. They're getting prepared for something.
Is this saber rattling to back the United States off, or are these guys ready to get jiggy with it, if you know what I mean?
I wouldn't say that it's saber rattling, right? You have to build the warship somewhere, man. There's no way for you to really hide it. They have to be somewhere, right? It's just a matter of how many you're going to build. And most of these are pretty modern, right? They're not like they started them in the 1980s and then they finished them today. No, these are things that were started last year and just now getting finished. So these are all modern equipment, all new operating systems, new missiles, quiet, motor engine systems and stuff like that to keep a low radar footprint. Corvettes, destroyers, frigates, and hovercrafts and stuff like. Man, you're not building all this, just to be, just to be nice. You're getting prepared for something big.
I think they're planning for some limited activity.
Mm-hmm.
In the South China Seas, I think they're prepping for some activity there. That's really what I think is going on. I think this thing is getting ready. They're letting the United States know we're getting ready to get live, and we're prepping. Mm-hmm. I don't know how this looks, but if we do get hot in this area, it could get very crazy.
Yeah, they actually have some. Pretty interesting designs. I don't, if they plan on taking Taiwan, all of this power, this force projection, they would actually be able to do it with all, if they encircle the island. It'll be bloody, but they'll be able to do it. Where is the next battlefield is the next question, right? Because they must be hedging their bets that this is going to be a showdown, and the warfare is going to be it's going to be a wet warfare, so to speak. It's going to be a blue water fight. I suspect and propose that they're going to join the Russians. We covered an article a couple months ago about them.
Yeah.
Actually, a couple of weeks ago, them working with the South Africans to do naval drills in the event that there's a fight in the Atlantic.
I think they're prepping for a few different areas. I think the Atlantic is going to be one theater, but I think they're going to be kind of knucking close to home as well. Mm-hmm. We have surrounded them, so they're going to have to break out of some of this. They have to beat some of this back. I think they're prepping for a few areas. I think they're going to be ramping up on these on this military naval hardware for a minute. I think they're going to start coming out with a lot of new stuff, and I think the game is changing, man. I think we're looking at this thing changing right here, right now. This is going to get live.
Yeah. You'd be crazy to think otherwise. They're ramping up way faster than Russia is even doing. Russia doesn't have enough naval ports to actually build. Or they don't have enough shipyards to actually build. They actually lack in all of these type of things. So they actually leaned on the French to actually build, a couple of their Minstrel class warships that are used for helicopter deployments. And the French kind of ripped them off. Somebody went in there and took all the electronics out. They suspect that it was French intelligence and American intelligence.
Oh, for sure. That's for sure. But they're letting you know. And I think this whole Taiwan situation, they're preparing for this to get hot, and they're looking to say, listen, we're going to protect this area. We're going to come in, take over if we have to, and we're going to protect our seas in this area. If you guys think you're going to come in here and roll up, you got another thing coming. I look at the Chinese. Every time I look at them, I go right back to my Sun Tzu. I go right back to that book, and what they say is when the enemy speaks or your opponent speaks in very humble terms, but yet he still continues his preparations, he will advance. When your enemy speaks or your opponent speaks in very bold terms and pretentiously advances, he will retreat. So these guys are speaking in humble terms, but they're making their preps. This is pretty serious. That's what I'm.
Yeah. More than likely, a lot of your battleground, your final battleground will probably be in Africa. Putin said that the next war won't be fought on Russian soil; it'll be fought somewhere else on enemy soil. So, what that means, going forward. I think the Russians have pretty much secured their western flank. They learned their lessons over the last 150 years. And they pretty much will determine that anybody who plans on on attacking Russia, it won't be attack on their soil. They'll bring the fight right back to whoever the enemy is. So, yeah, very, very interesting perspective.
Yeah, look, a lot of things could happen here. You got to go where the next battlefield is going to have to be where things can't really effectively go nuclear. So I'm thinking more towards the Middle East and more kind of in the lower, the Eastern or Eurasia. I'm thinking there, as opposed to destroy Africa right now would be a very poor business move on these guys' parts. They've put a lot of money into that. They don't want to blow that up. There's some other areas I think that they might be willing to fight a slight proxy war, or to play some dynamic, to really place themselves in a pretty dynamic situation. And I'm kind of looking at what's going on in Turkey and some of what's happening there with the next rise of the Ottoman Empire that they're trying. I think there might be some issues on that one as well. So I think I'm looking more towards Eurasia, moving more towards the Middle East, where we might start seeing some activity. But I think China is certainly going to look that ring that's surrounding them. They're looking to break that ring up. They're looking to break that ring that's surrounding them. Mm-hmm. So this is going to be very interesting. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. Something to pay attention to. Yeah, Bluetooth Tone in the chat says the Chinese are looking to secure Arctic trade routes. I don't think they'll be able to do that. The Russians pretty much control 75% of that. They're far away from home, those trade routes. So if anything, they're leaning on the Russians to actually to be the policeman of that trade route. And it's actually a good point that Bluetooth Tone is actually saying, because as the ice melts, the icebergs melt due to climate change and the shifts of climate. It has opened up an immense route and has allowed Chinese merchant ships to actually pass through without being sank by an iceberg. And so because of that, the trip to Europe is cut by 4 weeks, as opposed to going through the Suez Canal and whatnot, or going up the Atlantic. It's too far of a reach. It would probably take twice as long. And so because of that, the Chinese and the Russians have a new strategy that pulls all of the economic power away from the Europeans and puts it in the hands of the Russians, and takes it away from Africa, because Egypt relies heavily on the Suez Canal. That's a very nice chunk of change that they get from that.
There's been wars, there's been some conflicts over that as well. But if you also talk about up in the North Atlantic, you talk about the Straits of Gibraltar and that kind of thing, that's all going to be kind of, the Russians would be up there. Am I correct? They would be handling that. So I don't know. It's I can understand the point he makes. Whether or not that'll be the case, we'll have to see. But I'm starting to look at some of this stuff right now. This thing is moving kind of quick. I'm getting a little nervous. I'm getting a little nervous. And looking at some of the leadership that we have currently, I don't know if these guys are going to be able to play well on this three-dimensional chessboard that we're playing on right now. This is a funky game.
Yeah. Let me get to the next article. Sure. This one is from CNN.com. Russian spy ship off U.S. coast operating in an unsafe manner, officials say. Expand this out. A Russian spy ship has returned to international waters off the southeastern coast of the United States and is operating in what two U.S. officials told CNN is an unsafe manner. Ooh. The Victor Leonov, a Russian surveillance ship, has been sailing off the coast of South Carolina and Florida in the last few days, officials tell CNN, adding that the ship's actions were determined to be unsafe because it is not using running lights in low visibility weather and it is not responding to commercial vessels attempting to communicate to avoid potential accidents. The official said the Vishna class spy ship was also engaged in other erratic maneuvers. A spokesperson for the U.S. Coast Guard confirmed to CNN that the Coast Guard was broadcasting a marine safety information bulletin to alert mariners in the area to the Russian ship's presence and its behavior. The United States Coast Guard has received reports indicating that the RFN Victor Leonov has been operating in an unsafe manner off the coast of South Carolina and Georgia. The unsafe operation includes not energizing running lights while in reduced visibility conditions, not responding to the hails by commercial vessels attempting to coordinate safe passage and other erratic movements, the bulletin said. Vessels transiting these waters should maintain a sharp lookout and use extreme caution when navigating in proximity to this vessel. Mariners should make reports of any unsafe situations to the United States Coast Guard, it added. A defense official told CNN that the U.S. Navy's excuse me, USS Mahan and Arleigh Burke class destroyer was operating close to the Russian ship. The Victor Leonov regularly patrols in international waters along the eastern coast of the United States, with having done so every year since 2015. The Russian vessel also routinely operates in the Caribbean, including Cuba, Trinidad, and Tobago. Interesting. I always thought the Monroe Doctrine would say otherwise, but I guess not. The Russian ship's presence off the U.S. coast comes as the U.S. Navy's Arleigh Burke class guided missile destroyer, the USS Ross, visited Constanta, Romania, Monday for what the Navy called a scheduled port visit, part of the U.S. effort to bolster its presence in the Black Sea and support regional partners such as NATO ally Romania. Russia has boosted its military presence in that area. It seized Crimea from Ukraine in 2014 and regularly shadows American warships while they operate in the Black Sea. Crimea has really more or less, according to our civil society folks, has become an armed camp. The United States, the U.S. State Department's Assistant Secretary for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, Rob Destro, told reporters Monday as he discussed the militarization of Crimea. Tensions between Moscow and Washington remain high. Just days ago, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov visited the White House and repeatedly raised Russian concerns about the U.S. potentially dismantling the last remaining nuclear arms treaty between the two powers, a move that could reignite a U.S. Russia arms race. I always find this interesting that the idea here is that somehow it's okay for the United States to patrol in the Black Sea, which is Russia's backyard, but not the Russians to patrol in the Caribbean, which, according to the United States, is a part of their Monroe Doctrine, to have no warships in those areas outside other than the U.S.
Well, I think it's interesting because I think, this takes us back to 1962 with the Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, which was a little bit different, but the concepts were very similar with respect to, them being able to put missiles, us being able to put missiles on their borders, as in Turkey, but yet you know, they couldn't put missiles near our border as in Cuba. So, you know, we almost came to war over that, and we ended up having to make a back deal, a backdoor deal, you know, with them getting their missiles out, us getting our missiles out of Turkey as we forced them to back down and move their missiles out of Cuba. I think we were kind of looking at this once again, in some, you know, slightly different, but I think the terms and how this looks are rather similar.
No, that's very interesting. It was also interesting to me is that they stopped at Trinidad and Tobago. What were they doing? Going there for carnival?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
All right. Get to the next article. All right, this next one is from BBC.com. Poland may have to leave EU. Supreme Court warns. The proposals would allow judges to be dismissed if they question the government's judicial reforms. Judges say proposal threatened by primacy of EU law and could be an attempt to gag the judiciary. Poland has already been referred to the European Union Court of Justice, ECJ, regarding rules of judges. Under the proposal put forward by the Socially Conservative Law and Justice Party government, judges can be punished for engaging in political activity. Under the proposals put forward by the Socially Conservative Law and Justice Party government, judges can be punished for engaging in political activity. Any judge that questioned the legitimacy of judges nominated by the National Council of the Judiciary could be handed a fine or in some cases dismissed. Politicians will start discussing the proposals on Thursday. The ruling party claims changes to the law are needed to tackle corruption and overhaul the judicial system, which it says it is still haunted by the communist era, but the EU accused law and justice of politicizing the judiciary since it came to power in 2015. The Supreme Court said that the party was undermining the principle of the primacy of EU law over national law. It said in the statement, contradictions between Polish and EU law will, in all likelihood, lead to an intervention by EU institutions regarding an infringement of EU treaties and in the longer run will lead to the need to leave the European Union. This is very interesting. It also said the proposed bill will was evidently designed to allow President Duda to pick a new head of the court before a presidential election, which is expected in May. The court's Chief Justice, Professor Gersdorf, likened the governing party's proposal to the days of martial law in 1981 in communist Poland. I would therefore ask that the hatred of judges and courts stop being used as a weapon in the struggle for power, especially since repression, as in 1981, would be a sad expression of powerlessness rather than a manifestation of strength, she wrote in a statement on the court's website. Polish judges are nominated by the National Judicial Council, a body that is supposed to safeguard the independence of the judiciary and which until recently consisted of a majority of judges selected by their peers. However, in 2018, the ruling party changed the law so that the majority of judges sitting on the NCJ were appointed by the lower house of parliament, which is controlled by the PIS. Poland's NCJ has its membership of the European Network of Councils for the Judiciary suspended on the grounds it was no longer politically independent. Earlier this month, Poland saw thousands of people protest in cities and towns to show solidarity with judges who they said were facing intimidation. They called for the reinstatement of one judge who was dismissed from his post for questioning the appointment of another judge by the NCJ. This is really interesting. What people don't realize is that the European Union is a colonialist agenda. And that once you join the European Union, you no longer have any sort of previous rights as you did before. That's just not going to happen. All your bases all belong to the EU at that point. So if I think Poland is looking at Britain and saying, let's see what happens with Britain first. And if Britain and Brexit go as smoothly or has any rough cuts, we need to monitor that. And if we can get out of the European Union, it'll probably behoove us to actually get the hell out as soon as possible. All right. Get to the next article. All right, this next one from Bloomberg.com. U.S. concedes defeat on Nord Stream 2 project, officials say. The U.S. has little leverage. Let me go in first. The U.S. has little leverage to prevent the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline project between Russia and Germany from being completed, two administration officials said, acknowledging the failure of years-long effort to head off what officials believe is a threat to European security. The massive $11 billion project is just weeks away from completion and has led President Donald Trump to call Germany a captive to Russia. He has criticized the European Union for not doing more to diversify imports away from the nation that supplies more than a third of its gas. Senior U.S. administration officials who asked not to be identified discussing the administration's take on the project said sanctions that passed Congress on Tuesday as part of the defense bill are too late to have any effect. The U.S. instead will try to impose costs on other Russian energy projects, one of the officials said. So this is a map of what the Nord Stream 2 pipeline looks like as it passes through those waters from Russia, past Estonia, past Latvia, and through Finland, by Sweden, or outside of Sweden, and into northern Germany, which bypasses Poland. I think this is Kaliningrad right here. For whatever reason, they call it Russia. Kaliningrad is actually its own state. I'm not sure why they branded as something else other than that. The admission is a rare concession on what had been a top foreign policy priority for the Trump administration and highlights how European allies such as Germany have been impervious to American pressure to abandon the pipeline. It also shows how the U.S. has struggled to deter Russia from flexing its muscles on issues ranging from energy to Ukraine to election interference. It has been a commercial project, but with a huge geopolitical dimension attached to that. Peter Bayer, who is a German chancellor, who is German Chancellor Angela Merkel's transatlantic policy coordinator, told Bloomberg Television in an interview in Berlin on Wednesday. I'm expecting that the sanctions, if Donald Trump is going to sign that bill, will not have a big effect on that project. The administration is hoping to sharpen its focus on Russia when Deputy Secretary of State John Sullivan, who was confirmed as ambassador to the country last week, heads to Moscow next month. The post has been vacant since early October when former envoy John Huntsman stepped down, and ties between the two countries have only continued to sour. Yeah, this is a no-go for anybody trying to interfere into this. This is all, the pipe has already been laid, and the the gas pressure has already been pushed. So I'm not sure what they were expecting out of this. I mean, other than physical sabotage, I'm not sure what else they can do to this.
Yeah, I don't see either.
Yeah, it's a waste of time. Europe needs energy, and Russia has plenty of it. I mean, Europeans don't want to be sleeping in the cold in the middle of December and in January. So that deal has to go through. Trump was proposing, delivering gas through a ship. I mean, the amount of gas the amount of ships that you would need to push gas, you would have to have a dozen ships leaving per day just to deliver that much gas. It's just not feasibly possible.
That's the whole thing. Europe counts on that energy. I know they want to play kind of hardball, but say, well, we're going to go with our allies, American allies, to do whatever. But they've got real energy issues there. And then you got Britain, going on their Brexit move. I don't know. I don't see how Europe is really going to be able to fight a lot of this unless they want to get frozen out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that happening either. So this is going to be a very interesting play here. Very interesting play.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me get to the next article. Aljazeera.com. Greece and Turkey closer to armed conflict, says experts. Greece and Turkey have come closer to armed conflict after Turkey's surprise delineation of an exclusive economic zone with Libya, experts tell Al Jazeera. The agreement, signed on November 27th and unveiled on Thursday, maps out a corridor of water stretching across the eastern Mediterranean between the coast of Turkey and Libya, cutting across a swath that is also claimed by EU member Greece. EEZs allow countries exclusive rights to exploit natural resources, including mineral wealth. Turkish Energy Minister Faith Gomez has announced that once the agreement is ratified by both sides, Turkish drill ships will begin to search there for oil and gas. Although the Hellenic Navy neither confirms nor denies it, two experts tell Al Jazeera that Greece has dispatched naval forces to the disputed area northeast of Crete. If a Turkish drill ship does show up, our ships would take action against it. And that could lead to an armed confrontation because these ships are accompanied by naval vessels. And of course, that could ultimately lead to war, says a veteran senior diplomat on condition of an enemy.
These are two NATO countries, by the way. But anyway, go ahead.
National Public Law professor Angelos Seragrios also confirms that Greek naval forces have been dispatched as a deterrent to Turkish exploration. There will be no Turkish drill ship. It has been communicated to Turkey that we shall not tolerate any exploration in the area Greece considers to be its EEZ, says Seragrios, who also serves as MP for the ruling conservative New Democratic Party. We are preparing for all eventualities on all levels. Greek Defense Minister Nikos Papadopoulos told Sky News on Thursday. Without elaborating, the Navy's Chief of Staff, Admiral Nikos, added, "We shall not wait for anyone to come and help us. Whatever we do, we shall do alone." A meeting between Greek Prime Minister, not going to mention his name, Mitsotakis, and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on the sidelines of a NATO summit on Wednesday produced no breakthrough. It was an open and honest discussion that did not reach agreement on any subject raised, government sources told Al Jazeera, saying the topics included increased refugee flows from Turkey to Europe via Greece. There was agreement to continue confidence building measures and for both sides not to inflame the climate, but to keep the dialogue open, the sources said. Greece and Turkey have followed a series of confidence building measures since 1987 when they nearly came to war over hydrocarbon exploration in the Aegean. These include avoided military exercises during the summer tourist season, establishing a direct line between the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and Defense Ministers, and inviting officers from the other side to attend war games. Not all measures have been observed. For a period during 2017 and 2018, for example, the direct telephone line between the military chiefs was reportedly defunct. I did not leave the meeting with the impression that I was talking to people who simply showed up to speak their piece and leave without there being some room for agreement, said Populist. I believe there is room for agreement as long as people are well disposed. We showed a good disposition, but I did not see the same on the Turkish side. In a related development on Thursday, Cypriot President Nikos said his country would petition the International Court at The Hague to defend it from Turkish exploration in the Cypriot EEZ. Since last year, the Turkish exploration vessels have been looking for oil and gas in waters delimited by Cyprus as its EEZ in a series of international treaties with neighbors. The EU and the US have called Turkey's exploration in the Cyprus declared EEZ illegal and called on Ankara to stop. Sirigos believes the Turkish-Libyan agreement will be submitted to the UN as a way of addressing that issue. So it's about to go down. You have two NATO countries on opposing sides.
Hey, Mike?
Yes.
They did it before in 1974.
Yeah.
Greece and Turkey went to war with Cyprus. Two NATO countries back then. That's when I started questioning, not then, but I'm saying that's when I really started to look at it as I understood history better. I was around then. I remember that war. I remember the news on TV and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And as I became more knowledgeable of NATO and all this, I started really looking at this NATO was kind of useless in certain kind of ways. Yeah. I don't want to get all into the value of NATO and all that, but Turkey and Greece have gone to war before. And that war was in 1974. Mm-hmm. And, they've had a lot of little skirmishes then, and they're getting ready to get to Bracken one more again. And it's an energy game, and we know that Greece is desperate for certain kinds of resources, and they're going to go to war. They're going to go to war. And what's NATO going to do to stop this? This is going to be very interesting to see.
The thing is, Turkey violates Greece's space over 1,000 times a year. So you're talking at least 5 or 6 times a day they're violating their airspace. Yeah. The only reason that Greece doesn't respond is because they can't afford the fuel to fire up their jets. They can't just keep spending money like that.
That's right. So what kind of effect are they going to have on a war right now? They're not going to be able to go to war with Turkey and win in any kind of battle of attrition, any kind of battle of attrition is not going to happen, and these are two NATO-based countries.
Mhm.
Very interesting to watch how this thing's going to play out. That's what I'm saying. Shit is getting very funky right now. Very interesting to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Turkey's smelling a lot of weakness around. Turkey's smelling a lot of weakness. Turkey's trying to make some hardcore moves. They're trying to get exceedingly live right now. And Turkey's feeling this is
they wait. The Americans are leaving the Middle East, and they're the only power outside of Israel. Israel's not going to do anything major. They just don't have the ability to control occupied territories outside of Israel itself or Palestinian proper. But Greece has a formidable military. It's still capable. I probably wouldn't want to go to war.
Yeah, they're capable.
but
can they outlast? Can they outlast somewhat of an attrition war? Who else is going to be brought into this?
Depends.
These are two NATO countries. Where is Russia going to come into this game? All right, how are they going to get involved in this?
It depends. If Greece decides that, well, if that's the game that Turkey's going to play, then we'll back the Kurds. We'll take the Americans' place.
Exactly correct. We're looking at some of the same kind of situations we saw back during the Crimean War, and as the Ottoman Empire was coming down, these kind of actions were taking kind of place then. We're looking at a slightly, it's not exactly the same, but a slightly different but modified replay of some of this. And I'm watching this with extraordinary interest, because Turkey feels like they can get exceedingly live right now. And this is going to be very interesting to watch. Oh man, you got to have some intelligent people playing this game now. We can't have hammerheads in office at this stage. We got to have people who can think. And think short term and long term. We need some thinkers out here right now. This is not a game.
Yeah. Julian asked in the chat, Mike, don't you think the Turks can overrun the Greeks? No, they won't do that. They won't bog them down. They won't bog themselves down dealing with Greece. If the objective is to get their scientific exploration vessels into to Libya. To discover oil and gas. They just won't be able to. You can't maintain both. That was the whole reason as to why they went and bought an S-400, because they know that was their weak point. And Greece has a formidable air force capable of taking out all of their targets inside Turkey. That's why Turkey is worried. And they didn't want Cyprus to get an S-400 missile system either, because if that's the case, then that closes off the airspace for them too. So they're very worried about this. We also have complex design on the panel. What's going on, dude?
What up? What up?
Complex.
Big brother, what's going on?
The Stig.
Yeah.
All right, this one from Bloomberg.com. Pentagon chief queries Turkey's NATO loyalty after base threat. Spit this out. U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper said Turkey's threats to close two critical NATO installations if it's sanctioned for growing military ties to Russia raise questions about the country's commitment to Western alliance. A day after President Recep Tayyip Erdogan warned of a possible retaliation if the U.S. imposes penalties over Turkey's purchase of a Russian missile system. The Pentagon chief suggested the country may have set itself on a collision course with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. This is something that the alliance would have to discuss. If the Turks are serious about this, Esper told reporters on his plane Monday, according to the Defense Department's website, Erdogan denies his country, which has NATO's second largest military, is walking away from the alliance, and says its purchase of weapons from Russia doesn't weaken its role as a member. Yet that's not how some in NATO see it, especially with Turkey set to sign an agreement with Russia to jointly produce missiles and receive the know-how to develop its own defense systems. Taken together, the moves are posing the latest challenge to a bloc that has survived turbulent times over several decades. They are also taking a toll on Turkey's financial markets. The lira dropped almost 1.5% since Erdogan's remarks on Sunday night, trading at the lowest level in 2 months. Erdogan drags NATO bases into Rome. Strategically located between Europe and Asia, Turkey was a bulwark against the Soviet Union during the Cold War. But NATO members are voicing concern about its cultivation of military ties with Russia. Last month, Ankara agreed to support the alliance's plans to defend Baltic states only after receiving assurances that the US-backed Syrian Kurdish forces will be labeled a threat to Turkey. The standoff intensified with Erdogan's threat to shutter an early warning radar at Kursk and Incirlik airbase, used by the Pentagon to store tactical nuclear weapons and conduct strikes against the Islamic State. The issue here is, once again, one more game, what is Turkey's direction with regard to the NATO alliance, said Esper, citing the S-400 missile deal and the holding up of NATO plans for the defense of Europe. Turkey has the right to decide if it wants to house NATO bases or foreign troops, he said. I think this becomes an alliance matter and their commitment to the alliance, Esper said. Turkey appears undeterred by the prospect of U.S. sanctions and plans to acquire a second S-400 battery and pursue a joint development agreement in order to be able to produce its own sophisticated ballistic missiles. In accord is just around the corner, Ismail Demir said, head of Turkey's top defense procurement body, known as SSB, said Friday. The agreements with the Russian President Vladimir Putin reflect Ankara's desire for an increasingly independent role in regional policies as it sees power shifting away from the U.S. and Europe, as well as its dependence on Russia's support in neighboring Syria, as well as its supplies of natural gas. So, if Turkey closes this this air base, I don't know how much the U.S. really loses out of this, since they don't want to be in that theater anyways. I'm pretty sure that the generals are probably saying otherwise, saying, yo, we really need those bases, but close off the base and gives them justification for not even being in the Middle East.
I think it would also serve as symbolic of just like the changing relations between the U.S. and Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think there's also like some deeper symbolism there. I mean, we've been talking about this for well over a year now, in terms of Turkey's geopolitical positioning, right? It's in a very opportunistic position right now, okay, in order to choosing its own alliances. You know, and what type of power it can wield over the region where it's at. So I think we saw when they the Patriot missile system for that S-400, that right there was sort of like the turning tides, if you will. And then there were also some of the discussions that were being had with the Turks and the Europeans that didn't necessarily suggest like gung-ho on just re-upping with NATO. So this is just more of like Turkey really just flooding this.
You breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, I think he's shifting gears. Why don't we shift gears to the next article?
But I think he's right. I think he's right.
Yeah. All right, this one is from the Middle East Forum. Is Turkey coming back? Policy experts predict rogue Ankara over long term.
There we go. Here it is.
On September 19th, 2017, a Turkish delegation stormed out of a NATO Parliamentary Assembly meeting held on Philadelphia's historic Independence Mall. The delegates were outraged when the hosting Middle East Forum refused to honor their distant leaders' request to disinvite from the conference a regime dissident. Rather than submit to the will of the regressive Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Middle East Forum President and founder Daniel Pipes taught NATO how to stand up to a totalitarian tyrant. Daniel Pipes is a very racist motherfucker, man. If anybody's ever watched his work, he's very racist. More than 2 years later, the forum convened a Capitol Hill briefing to examine the prospects of normalized relations with Ankara, asking, is Turkey coming back, and offering much needed update on U.S. policy. Held on December 9th, 2019, the conference brought together foreign policy experts in a panel of representatives from the communities most affected by Turkey's neo-Ottoman ambitions. Pipes' opening remark were followed by comments from Ilan Berman, Vice President of the American Foreign Policy Council. Panelists included Aram Hemperin, Executive Director of the American National Committee of America, ANCA. I'm gonna read all these names, I'm just gonna go down. Each of the speakers agreed that that Turkey under Erdogan has presented massive problems for America and the West. There is no shortage of indictments against the ruling Justice and Development Party, AKP. Drilling in the Cypriot EEZ, invading a neighbor in Syria, and meddling in Libya are among the foreign policy failures that isolate Turkey and leave Erdogan highly exposed, according to Pipes. Berman emphasized Turkey's tilt to the east in its relationship with rogue actors. Indeed, Erdogan has undermined the interoperability of the NATO alliance by purchasing Russian S-400 anti-aircraft batteries, supporting terrorist factions such as Hamas and Hezbollah, and looking the other way as ISIS jihadists use his country as a springboard to launch terrorist operations in Iraq and Syria. On the domestic front, countless violations of human rights atrocities continue to occur under Erdogan. Turkey continues to be the largest jailer of journalists, surpassing China, he continued. In the most recent example of Erdogan's unending campaign to eliminate political opposition and consolidate power, Roman pointed to dozens of mayors are rounded up in the southeast of the country, almost all from Kurdish majority towns. However, all of these problems are merely symptomatic of political conditions within Turkey. The challenge facing the speakers and panelists was to determine if the country's rampant anti-Western attitudes will outlast the current regime. Can Turkey return to the neat 50-year, return to the seat, it should say, I think this is written wrong. Neat 50 years between its NATO accession and Erdogan's 2002 election, when, as Pipes explained, Washington-led Ankara followed. With the possible exception of Berman, the speakers agreed that Turkey's animosity would outlive Erdogan. There is no way that American foreign policy should be based on the assumption that we can bring Turkey back. It is gone as Iran is gone, said Pipes. Not forever, but for the duration. We need to prepare for a rogue Ankara over the long term. Zemendis agreed, declaring that there is not a chance of Turkey coming back if Washington continues its dysfunction in U.S.-Turkey policy. He pointed to decades of appeasement driven by the hope that Turkey could serve as a model to other countries in the region. Speaking for the Kurdish community, Abdul Qadir said, "We don't see what's happening in Turkey as Erdogan's problem. We see this as a Turkey problem. Turkey Turkey's policies aren't changing anytime soon. He added, Berman was the only speaker. What the hell just happened? Berman was the only speaker to see an alternative path forward for the U.S. U.S.-Turkey relations. Given the current trajectory, I think it's difficult to be optimistic. However, he believes that policymakers can still affect change by shaping Turkey's foreign policy and identity in a more constructive way. Pipes is not optimistic for a brighter post-Erdogan future in Turkey. The nationalists and the leftists are even more hostile than Erdogan's Islamist party, argued the foreign president. So no, there's not a reason to think that when he goes, we will find a friendlier face in Ankara. Looking at Turkey as an intractable long-term threat, each participant offered a way forward for American policymakers. Pipes proposed an 8-point escalating policy prescription that starts with smaller diplomatic gestures and ends with wholesale isolation of the Turkish regime. If permanently rejecting the extradition request for a Turkish opposition figure, Fethullah Gulen, fails to produce results, Pipes suggests inviting opposition figures to Washington, applying broad sanctions, and even eventually expelling Turkey from NATO. Hepburn called on Congress to ratify a bill that would formally recognize the Armenian genocide. Just days later, the US Senate unanimously passed a resolution that recognizes the Ottoman Empire's systematic killing of over 1.5 million unarmed Christian Armenians. Until then, as Harperian noted, US policy regarding the genocide was set in Ankara, exported to Washington, and enforced by US presidents, Democrat and Republican. Abdul Qadir lobbied for Washington to strengthen the Kurdish position and approach the Kurds inside Turkey. For his part, Zemendis believes that the international community must deny Erdogan any leverage it might obtain if policymakers want to realize change, including inviting Turkey back to the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. We still resist using sticks, Zemendis said. Although the other speakers believe the lawmakers should consider Turkey's deaccession from NATO, Berman insisted that a more fruitful line of inquiry would be to find a clear path for extracting penalties on Turkey within NATO. Although there have been efforts to take on Erdogan and Turkey from affected minority groups, such as Armenian Kurdish protests against pro-Erdogan Islamist organizations inside the US, these have been localized and piecemeal. All three panelists endorsed the idea of a national coalition that can combine the resources of a communities affected by Turkey's geopolitical aspirations. This is already happening informally, said Zemendis, and is really responsible for a lot of movement on Capitol Hill. He referenced cooperation between groups such as Christians United for Israel. Makes me want to vomit just reading that. The American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, and representatives from the Armenian Kurdish Greek bloc, which have formed a united front against Turkey. Conditions have changed since the 2017 NATO conference, when all of the European parliamentarians supported the Turkish delegation's impromptu decision to boycott the meeting. But now the situation is very different. Maybe he's pushed it too far, Roman predicted, referring to Turkey's dictator. Still, there is no reason to suspect that Turkey will suddenly come around. The nationalist parties trending to replace the Islamist AKP appear to be the greater of the two evils, and Washington continues to be hampered by bureaucratic inertia. Therefore, the way forward is clear. There should be a united umbrella organization to tackle the problems associated with modern Turkey, Roman said in his closing remarks, calling for a coalition which includes everyone in the Eastern Mediterranean and also those of disaffected dissident Turks who are now living in exile. So they're trying to treat Turkey like Iran, and they're predicting or maybe making the conditions so hostile that they do turn into another pariah state like Iran is a pariah state in the West. So I think, and I suspect, they need Turkey to be to become a pariah, and it gives them justification that if they do leave, they're going to make sure that they weaken the Turkish state in the same way they tried to weaken the Iranian state. Now, if you take into consideration Iran under U.S. sanctions for the last 40 years, you would say they have been fairly self-sufficient. Iran has a massive energy sector with nuclear scientists all over the place and some of the best medicine too. For those of you who are not understanding, people go all the way to Iran just to have cancer treatment done. They seem to be very proficient in medical tourism. Also, their fourth industrialization is coming to fruition in a way that even Israel is very much taking observation to. So if that's the case, Turkey and Iran both have similar populations. They both have similar levels of education. They both have similar militaries. One's a NATO partner, one is not. And they both control levels of ocean or accesses to sea that are very much critical for any sort of country to do business, especially Russia and the United States. The Iranians can close off the Straits of Hormuz. The Turks can close off access to the Black Sea, and it can control a good portion of the Mediterranean. I would say that there's very much similarities there. I would not be surprised if Erdogan is talking to Iran behind the scenes on how to best tread this whole entire thing.
You can count on it, and these guys are going to get aggressive. They're looking at a few things that are here. That's why I'm watching Turkey very closely, man. They've been, watching them very close. So I suspect that they're going to be doing a few other things, and I don't know. We just have to watch. But I think your overall synopsis is pretty correct. You've heard what I think about Turkey and kind of moving along with the empire. You think I'm far off the mark on that, or?
No. I think the Ottoman Empire is the wrong term to use, but I do think that they are trying to not be so dependent on Western powers, right? If they can be as self-sufficient as Iran is, that's immensely powerful because they don't do that much business with the United States. If you really do look at the numbers, they only do about $9 billion worth of trade per year between them and the United States, whereas the trade that they do with Europe is up to 80 Russia and Europe is up to 85 to $100 billion. So a lot of their revenue comes from not so much the United States and Canada, but more, or even Britain for that matter.
Europe.
It's coming from Europe and it's coming from Russia. The skyscrapers in Russia are actually built by Turks, very proficient at building the skyscrapers. So, and they're actually really good at leather, which is something I learned recently. They have a whole entire college dedicated, or a whole university dedicated for leather manufacturing.
Okay.
So you look at the populations of Turkey and Iran, you see that they're both tipping around 80 million people.
Yep.
Look at their level of education is very, very similar. And look at their level of sophistication, militarily speaking. The article mentions that Turkey supports Hamas and Hezbollah. This is not necessarily true. Hamas, they would support because of the Muslim Brotherhood, but not exactly militarily. It's just a political support. So if you think about Greece has a Russian S-300 surface-to-air missile system. The United States hasn't even blinked at that. Whereas Turkey buys the S-400 and all of a sudden it's up in arms because it needs Turkey to be weak as possible to prevent themselves from from being a breakaway state. That's what they worried about with Iran, and now they have to deal with Iran. So, and Saudi Arabia is even more worried because if Saudi Arabia controls the two mosques, the two holy mosques in the Middle East, which is very critical for political and social influence. Turkey wants to be or at least Erdogan wants to present Turkey as the holier than thou sort of approach, politically speaking, for a lot of Muslims, right? They want to be the
correct. They're very much an Islamist state. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So they want to support, the Palestinians where it's convenient for them, and then they want to support, the Uyghurs in China, which is a very delicate issue because China is saying, hey, these guys are terrorists, and Erdogan is saying, hey, if they fight for us, they're our friends. So, and then Egypt is looking at them sideways because they support the Muslim Brotherhood, and Egypt had to overthrow militarily the democratically elected president Mohamed Morsi, who died in prison recently, as they kept his ass in there. This is very, the Middle East is a very complicated area, man, politically speaking.
I'm just saying that there's a lot going on. There's a three-dimensional chess game being played, and you might not agree with me with respect to the Ottoman Empire going on, but I think Turkey is looking at empire as well. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going with history. And history tends to give you a good lead on some of this stuff, and that's what I'm going on. And I don't think I'm too far off the mark.
Oh, I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm saying the Ottoman Empire, as we know it, they would never be able to reestablish that. Not with the military actors that are involved now. Russia would never allow Turkey to take Syria in the way that the Ottoman Empire did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They would never allow that to happen, and Europe would never allow them to expand their way into Greece. That just wouldn't happen. None of the European states have any interest in seeing Turkish military and influence on their borders.
Well, we've seen certainly issues go down between Turkey and Greece now for the last, for the last 40 years. 40 some odd years since the Cyprus conflict, and I'm seeing that redouble right now. And your analysis, I believe, is pretty good as far as Turkey maybe not invading or coming in to knock Greece out and get caught up in a long drawn out war from that perspective. I can agree, but you just don't know about certain kind of things. If they think that they can take Greece and really remove them in certain kinds of ways, you may not be able to re-anneal the empire as it was. But if you can give, if it can operate somewhat like it was in the past, I think Turkey would be happy with some of that, and I think they got a long range plan here. That's how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, you got to. I mean, you got to, man. The EU is kind of breaking up before our eyes here, and there's a lot of opportunity.
Your mic is breaking up a lot, Complex. Yeah. I mean, I'm not disagreeing that Turkish influence being spread around in sort of the former Ottoman Empire enclaves that were once there. I'm saying they would never be able to hold these influences very long. We saw what happened with the Turkish flotilla that went to Gaza as an aid ship, and Israel had no problem jumping on board and popping all those Turkish workers on there. So, and Turkey did nothing about it. I mean, they basically sent the ambassador home, throw him out. That's the extent of it. But they didn't actually act physically enough to force that spirit of influence. That was in 2009.
Yeah.
So Ottoman Empire, it sounds good in theory, but in actuality, in practicality, they would never be able to establish something like that. They would have to do what China has done with the Belt and Road Initiative, which I think is what they're trying to push for, is a Belt and Road Initiative.
Yeah, I'm saying this is just a much more of a long-term effect. I don't think this is anything that we're going to see immediately, but I'm just keep my eye on it, and let's see what type of alliances they make, because that's going to be very key in this. But I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, overall pretty good breakdown. This is a lot of stuff going on here. So what I want to do is definitely get a lot more inside information, as much as I can get, to really see what else is going on behind the scenes as some of these other more off the beaten track kind of news agencies has got a lot of real good stuff that comes out that might elucidate upon this even further. So
yeah. If we look at a map of Africa, we can see how much Turkish influence is now starting to come up. Actually, let me pull up a map of Africa. All right, Turkish influence. Let me see. All right, clean map. All right, you just.
Hey, how do I sound now?
You sound okay, dude.
Okay.
All right. Here's a basic map of Africa. I don't really have the recent Turkish map for whatever reason. It's kind of hard to find. Turkey has basically swallowed up Somalia, built all the infrastructure up in there, and they also have a lot of influence in Oman, if I remember correctly. Oman and Qatar. So 1, 2, 3, you have 3 countries there. You have Iran as well. I wouldn't say Iran, but they have some political alliances in Iran, and then you take into consideration they have made their way into Tunisia, Algeria, if I remember correctly, and I want to say that they were in maybe Central African Republic, if I remember correctly. So Turkish influence is basically economic. From if we're using the Ottoman example, they're trying to expand economically, and they've embedded themselves in these sort of places.
Right.
And now they want to get into Libya. They need to secure Libya. At this point, they need to secure Libya in order to.
Now, if it wasn't for me, so how dare you tell me I don't help my goddamn son?
So they need to secure Libya in order to keep that trade link going. So that sort of Belt and Road Initiative, where you have Tunisia, Libya, that connection right there, that funnels a trade route back into Turkey. And then you figure in Somalia, which has great influence over the Red Sea, and the Suez Canal, as well as keeps Saudi Arabia at bay. because Saudi Arabia is pretty weak in this area right here. They don't have a whole lot of naval influence here, a lot of blue water influence. And so, because Somalia is so large in mass, and the ability to build out infrastructure there actually allows them to have cheap investments for their sphere of influence.
Right.
And then you factor in, they're trying to embed themselves into Syria. That would be their Ottoman Empire, but it has not proven to be very sustainable. It's actually cost them a lot of money to actually, send their armaments into there and actually try to occupy it. It's not feasible for them for the long term, especially if the lira keeps dropping in the way that it does.
Yeah, especially right now. Yeah, so like I said, I'm just looking at this over the long term. Let's see how this evolves. But yeah, Mike, I think we're basically, we're very much on the same page, and so I'm kind of looking at it, but I'm kind of liking your analysis here tonight as well. You kind of tearing it out the frame.
Well,
like that.
That's what we doing here, man.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah, where's Black Narcissus Beast when we need him?
BGS, yeah, I would like to have him come in here and just throw a little gas on this bad boy, and get the flame cooking a little hotter as well. But
yeah. All right, this one is from the European Council on Foreign Relations. Turkey and Libya filling the European vacuum. I'm not going to read this whole thing. Last week, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan grabbed international headlines by declaring that Turkey was ready to deploy troops to Libya as part of a new security arrangement between Ankara and the Libyan government. Coming soon after the two sides concluded a maritime border agreement, the possibility of Turkish troops in the war-torn North African nation has further raised temperatures in the Eastern Mediterranean over gas and drilling rights. Ankara has long supported the UN-recognized Tripoli-based Government of National Accord, GNA, against the forces of General Khalifa Haftar, who remains the de facto leader in eastern Libya and is backed by the United Arab Emirates, Russia, and France. The Libyan Prime Minister, Fayez al-Sarraj, in Istanbul the second time in a month. And on television, the Turkish president repeated the offer to send in troops. If Libya makes such a request from us, we can send our personnel there. Around 20 drones help forces defend against Haftar pushback on all fronts. Ankara views its successful involvement there as an emblem of Turkey's growing self-confidence as a regional power. The conflict in Libya also represents the new fault line in the Middle East, with Turkey and Qatar on one side and UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt on the other. The Turkish vision of the region is at odds with UAE. The proxy war between the two camps is playing out in both Libya and Syria. But the most significant benefit to Turkey of this rapprochement is its ability to restrict oil and gas exploration in the Middle East, and for its reunification between the Turkish and Greek sides have borne no results. To complicate matters, Cyprus has been a member of the European Union since 2004, making its outstanding disputes with Turkey in EU-Turkish matter.
That's what I was talking about previously. I was bringing that up previously.
Since 2017, tensions have been rising over drilling rights off the island. Cyprus has signed exploration deals with several international companies, and there are plans for a gas pipeline linking Eastern Mediterranean gas fields with European markets. Meanwhile, Turkey has sent its own exploration ships and naval vessels off Cyprus to block Cypriot attempts. It argues that energy resources in the region should be shared between the Republic of Cyprus and its internationally isolated other half, the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. The GNA was not initially keen to insert itself in the Eastern Mediterranean quagmire or to antagonize Europe since 2018 and had effectively ignored Turkish overtures for a maritime memorandum of understanding, but now felt it had little choice. Despite being an internationally recognized government of Libya, the recognition has failed to materialize into tangible or even rhetorical support during Haftar's prolonged assault on Tripoli. Indeed, the Berlin Conference process that kicked off in September was supposed to end violations of the United Nations Security Council arms embargo. But instead, Haftar's backers massively stepped up their support with shipments of advanced arms and airstrikes. This was met with familiar international silence, even as Tripoli came under relentless barrage and Russian private military contractors intervened on Haftar's side. All of this heightened the pressure on the GNA to act. The security arrangement is now changing the policy, the balance of power in Libya. It has already proved a massive morale boost on the front lines, and its effects are visible on the ground. Most recently, for the first time since April, Haftar announced 0 hour for his invasion of Tripoli. But this time, the GNA repelled the attack and followed it up with rapid counter offensive that advanced the GNA lines for the first time in months. New weaponry, including Turkish anti-armor missiles, have been used to great effect. While attention has largely focused on the prospect of a direct Turkish intervention, the bulk of the security agreement is about training and capacity building. Although the GNA forces have developed organizationally improved command and control structures over the course of the war, they struggled to take their formalization further and suffered for it. Interior Minister Fateh Bashaga had long struggled to break the militia stranglehold over the GNA and build a professional force. He requested similar assistance from the Europeans, but it now appears that Turkey will not only defend the GNA, but influence the future security setup. So I'm not going to read the rest of this whole thing because I think we got the gist already. I think what could possibly happen, worst case scenario, is that you could have Libya split into two states, East Libya and West Libya, which would create 57 African states for the African Union. I don't know. This could be really messy. Turkey wants to insert itself, but at the same time, it can barely handle itself against the Kurds. So I think they want to support the UN-backed government because it looks good to them politically, right? If NATO's not going to back you, you at least have some influence over the UN by inserting yourself behind the UN-backed government, which is the GNA. I'd be interested to hear what Gaddafi's son has to say about all this because he's been quiet.
That's the key piece right there. What does his son have to say? You think he's going to be sitting here looking to become president of two separate states? Hell no. He's going to want to keep that together, and he's also going to want to go further with that economic plan that he had, that his father, that got shut down with his dad previously. He's going to try to work that, and he can only do that successfully and properly with Libya as a state. I think for Turkey to try to roll through and play that type of game, as you say, they have a problem with the Kurds. They're going what they call a bridge too far here. So I don't know if they're going to really be able to expand or exert like that in the region and have that level of success at this stage. So that's what I say. It's going to be very interesting to see what kind of alliances they make. But I think they're going to be looking more for the short term to deal with more of their short term plans as opposed to some of the long-term stuff, and then of course going against Russia in many ways. They're not going to really be able to play that game successfully as of right now. So when I talk about this, the whole game with respect to to the re-annealing of the Ottoman Empire. I'm not looking at this in any kind of fast or quick way. It depends on many of the alliances that are made and what's actually going to happen on the continent. So there's so much going on at this stage. As I said, it's hard for me to really sit down and totally speculate on this to say exactly how this thing is going to shape out. It's because there are a lot of moving pieces here right now, and I'm looking at the experts who are looking at this in the region, and they're coming up with a lot of different views. And we're pretty smart guys here, but we're not experts in this region. So we're definitely speculating. I think speculation is good. Your speculations are as good as anything that I've seen so far, even with respect to Al Jazeera and let's say the Guardian and others. I mean, they're bringing up some real heavy hitters to talk on this, and this is, I know they're holding back some kind of information because I know they're backdoor deals and stuff getting made or alliances should trying to get into place. But as far as Turkey coming in, getting involved in Libya, splitting Libya in half, 2 states, and you got Gaddafi's son coming up in the middle of this, and all the different plays that are going to be made. No, I don't see that happening. Now, could be wrong. Who knows? But we'll see. I know the next time we talk on this, I'm going to be much sharper because there's new stuff coming down on this every day. So I'm just looking at this, and this is a fast horse running right now.
Well, keep in mind that Turkey has already shot down a drone for Haftar.
Okay.
One of Haftar's drones. He shot it down with a laser cannon. The first time a laser cannon's ever been used on a battlefield before. This was only this summer that this happened. Right. So Turkey has put itself in the square position. How they were able to get this laser cannon off and nobody knew about it, no one really knows. They scorched the drone and brought it down. Apparently, Turkey is demonstrating that they have the power and the will to act on their ambitions. If they're going to play the game in the way that they're going to play it, they could very much take most of Libya with those sort of capabilities, especially if they're putting their guys on the ground.
They could, but we got to see who else that Libya is going to be playing with. What other alliances are going to be made here to counteract some of this? We don't know yet.
Well, we know that Russia backs Haftar.
We know that.
Backs Haftar. Egypt backs Haftar.
We know that.
Backs Haftar. The Italians, on the other hand, are kind of a wild card because if they back the GNA, because Italy has a vested interest in this as well. Italy had oil contracts with Libya getting cheap oil, so
yeah, they did, and their interest that they had in Eritrea and so forth.
Was that with Total?
Yes, Total was. Well, Total is French, but
no, that's French. But that was wasn't that the conglomerate, the petrochemical conglomerate that was getting large sums of their sources out of Libya?
Total was one. Luke Oil and Gazprom was another, which are both Russian. Those contracts were torn up, and then the Chinese contracts were torn up as well after they overthrew Gaddafi.
Right.
The Americans came in and tore up the contracts, so which would starve China right out of oil exploration. So a lot of people don't know that it was the Chinese that helped discover water inside Libya with Gaddafi. So they were they were the labor behind it. And so there's too many. Libya is a very complicated area right now. It's a very bad neighborhood.
Yep.
You could, there's a lot of Syrian, well, I shouldn't say Syrian, but a lot of what they consider to be ISIS actors inside Libya. How they got there, no one really knows. Apparently they didn't swim across the Mediterranean, but they're supposedly there. Haftar has his own military, the LNA, the Libyan National Army. He used to be Gaddafi's boy. He turned cold on Gaddafi, and came back when Gaddafi died. Right from the U.S.
Yep.
There's a lot of moving pieces inside Libya right now.
It's hard to call it. It's hard to call that right yet. A lot of pieces in there.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm watching it. That's why I'm like, I don't know. I don't, going out on a limb and saying much. And like I said, I've been listening to a lot of this. I've been trying to put a lot of this together. You got experts talking 3 and 4 different directions on this. So, I don't know.
It depends on whose interests they represent.
What do you say, Complex?
No, I said that not all depends on whose interests they represent.
Yeah, it's fact. So,
This is one of those things. And it's unfortunate that Black people in Libya are the ones who are on the losing end of all of this. They don't benefit from anything. In fact, they're the ones on the run.
Those are the ones that were getting well, it wasn't so much slavery going on, but they were trying to enslave some of these guys and running some real ill shit going on there. So,
well, they actually killed most of them. They killed most of the men. Al Jazeera actually has a documentary about them, the women on the run. Out there dragging women by their breasts. So, anybody who thinks that Gaddafi did not like melanated people, you'd be
very wrong.
Yeah,
you would be facing its real-time contradiction. Right? Because you're seeing what others think of Black folks versus what it was that Gaddafi was trying to do. And the differences are glaring.
Mm-hmm.
And you got the red skin, the brown skin Arabs. They're in there, pulling all that shit off.
Yep.
And
that's why.
Yeah.
It was the Nation of Islam got lots of support financially from Gaddafi.
Close to $1 billion.
Yep.
A billion fucking dollars. So when that shit happened, that's when the United States really got nervous and really started worrying about the connections between the Nation of Islam and Libya. They had a lot of problems there, a lot of issues. That was
the only Arab leader to apologize for slavery, Arabs' contribution to slavery against melanated people. No other Arab leader has ever done that. As a matter of fact, not even the United States has done that. So, and he actually compensated those people who were disproportionately impacted. What we would call ADOS over there. They have their own ADOS, which are African descendants of slaves, the Tuaregas, who
got a measure of reparations. Let's just call it what it was.
Yeah, lots of reparations, access to land, access to socialized medicine and socialized support. Every Tuarega had a apartment or some form of condo or some form of house as a part of reparations.
Sure did, and mind you, and it had one of the finest medical systems on the continent. One of the finest medical systems on the continent. Period.
And if they
rivaled South Africa,
right? And if they cannot find you, if they couldn't perform the operational procedure in Libya, they actually sent you somewhere else to go get it done and pay for it. So Gaddafi, as well as Mugabe, were the benchmarks for masculinity in Africa. What it looks like to actually have a plan and put it into action. Unlike some of these other momos who come onto a microphone and sit behind the screen and talk about being pro-Black. These people were really, really pro-Black. At one point, Mugabe Zimbabwe has the highest form of literacy on the continent.
Mm-hmm.
So, say what you want. These Africans don't like you. They don't like you, Nagon. Don't come there.
No, we gonna go in on that because these people are fools. These people who are pushing these ADOS haters who are pushing a derelict. A derelict narrative that is actually deleterious to the game as far as than being rather helpful. They're being deleterious, and they're sitting here with 2,500 people in their chat rooms and stuff, talking out the sides of their ass with blonde hairs between their teeth.
Crazy.
Nah, man. No. They need to be taking a task on this. They're talking out the sides of their ass. They don't know what they're talking about. They need to be challenged every time they come up and say something stupid. And we need to be doing that right here and talking about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and shout out to Afro Synergy for doing the back-to-back today. You mean back-to-back on them.
Afro Synergy, shout out to you, bruh. You stomping skulls. Stomping derelict skulls. That's what I like.
Afro Synergy did 2 live streams today. He went back-to-back, going against the hashtag movers and fakers.
Yeah.
He definitely stomped a mud hole in them, tore them
out the mud hole. We have to move. We have to make strong contacts with those of the continent. They're trying to put together a United States of Africa. That's what this thing is going all about. We're not supposed to be a part of this. We're not supposed to get in on that action. What the hell? What are people thinking? Have they even understood how much of the freedom that we got here in Africa? How we also had a lot of that play over here.
They're not.
Do they see? Do these people have any understanding of history whatsoever? These people are idiots, and they're out here talking with their mouths wide open and getting money on this.
If you were,
If you
were making the decision tomorrow to become a globalist, what would be the first place you would think to go?
To ask the question is to answer it. We already know.
I'm just saying. So
how are these people missing out? I mean, you just showed, you were on here last week, pulling out of your side pocket and turning that bitch on a freaking African cell phone.
Yeah.
Designed in Africa. And then you had some Negro who's a self-hater got up here talking about, oh, don't trust an African. Man, don't come up here like that again, bruh. Gave you a break. Don't come up here like that again. All right. I'm just telling you, you got this going on right now, and you got Negroes operating like this. That's why we have the problems that we do. And these people are supposed to be intelligent, supposed to be smart. I can't explain this.
Well,
I can't explain it.
Well, look, I mean, the thing about it is the device is symbolic. More than anything, it's symbolic. And it's symbolic in the sense of there are things actually happening there. And yes, they are open for business. And yes, they would like to do business with us. So it was largely symbolic. However, there's also application. And this is what I mean. Like, if you were to think about tomorrow waking up and saying, you know what, man, I want to do global business. What would be one of the first places that you would logically think to go?
Yeah, but see, if you're thinking about, I got a part of the black politics, and they don't like you over there. And
but you gotta have, but you and I both know this, big bro. You and I both know this, big bro. You gotta have business supporting your politics, and vice versa.
Yeah, but if you're not thinking clearly, and you're thinking emotionally, and you're talking out the sides of your ass because you have some emotional block to thinking 3-dimensionally and looking at this thing from a 3-dimensional perspective. But what you have to think in this game, the thinkers out here, this is how they think. You have to think this way. And these people out here grabbing minds and grabbing the consciousness, nah, man. Channel's small right now, but we gonna counter that.
Well,
but Afro Synergy, shout out to you, bro. If you're out there, shout out to you.
I'll have to check that out. I actually popped up on Ramil's hangout earlier. They were kind of discussing, Trump and things of that sort. But I just kind of went on, I had to kind of explain a position, from a political standpoint, that had largely, to deal with, the significance of Donald Trump, and and I was sort of questioning, what exactly is the black male agenda, and it was pretty striking. People had to kind of think about it, which kind of told me I don't know if they really ever had one, but I was like, look, it was, it's pretty easy, for somebody like a Trump to throw a few crumbs on the table given that his opposition hasn't thrown you any.
Yeah. And the few crumbs he's thrown on the table, he's claiming that people got more employed when we know that employment rates for Black people were going up since 2010. And, his prison reform program, where he's taken a lot of people out of jail based on nonviolent crime and some of the effery that's gone on in the system. That was the bone he threw. And brothers were like, I'm glad to catch that bone. And the state of the economy. And Trump was also understanding you got these morons, and I was on my fraternity brothers channel the other day, in the chat room, kind of throwing a couple of rocks, listening to some of what these people were saying, and that's Roland Martin. They were talking about, the school system, it's about Black women, and it didn't mention one thing about Black men, and they're talking about Trump with respect to this, and it's like, hold on one second. We are some of the most adversely affected people that have been affected by poor education, the prison industrial complex, and the whole deal. And they're talking about Black women. Not that Black women are not an important part of the community, but Black men aren't, and Black boys aren't either. And that's part of what you're seeing of this exodus of Black men starting to leave the Democratic Party and making some other moves. And the Democrats they're just not reading this right. They're not reading it right. And that I feel is going to be a greater problem. And this is something where the manosphere itself needs to kind of step up even more and put more pressure in that area as well. As that's why it was started. And this is something that we got to continue to press on. This is not about who's select and who's dating who and who's banging what. That shit is whack. We got to sit here and talk about what's really affecting us. And they're trying to take us off the table as far as the key political issue here in this country in the dialogue. We're off the table.
Yeah.
Insane.
I mean, I really, I'm trying not to come off or sound, adversarial or anything like that. But you do actively have to push against narratives that may not necessarily reflect reality as reality actually is, So in terms of like the things like the automation stuff and the AI, and this perceived idea or notion that there's an abundance of jobs that are created as a result of this, and I'm kind of like, well, look, the reality of it is that there is and there's already an abundance of jobs created as a result of the rollout of these types of technologies. I think you have quite a few requisitions there, do you not, Nagone, that you're trying to fill, right?
I have it, but I got my jobs report from Indeed. They give you the whole report. You get a monthly. You also get a report on what's going on when you subscribe to the full service, and you get all. I'm on top of all the figures. Average job right now that the average American is grabbing is about $18,000 a year, $18,000. The tech jobs, the tech jobs. Now, hang on a second. These are average job that the average person is grabbing $18,000. All right, can't do too well on that. Okay, no. But the tech positions that I have, and I've just been trying to average it out as to all the recs that I have. And there's, it averages out to about 55,000. So what does that mean? That means that you've got plenty of jobs. I got plenty of jobs right now. And Mike wanted me to kind of go over some of those other recs with respect to the blockchain and all that. That's 200, 250, that kind of thing. Your, the machine learning positions and so forth. That's all well over six figures. So I'm representing a lot of six-figure stuff. But then there's other stuff that's really kind of on the, essay level, still with some Unix stuff, which is unbelievable. But there's some stuff out here also on the DBA level and systems administrator level that is paying, in the 40s to 50s, people just kind of getting in with 2-3 years of experience that they want to get some decent people on. So there's and then you have, of course, the help desk positions and so forth that are some of them are part-time, but most of them are are kind of contracting positions that are paying about $22 an hour, which, will come out to be somewhere around, around 35, 40,000 or so.
Right.
So you have a lot of that going on. But got a lot of high level stuff out here. Got a lot of high level stuff. Where
you
average
would
job
say
is
that
55,000.
so
that's about where the average is coming into.
Yeah, and oddly enough, like a lot of those positions that really kind of are paying positions and salaries that will allow one to not only sustain themselves, but maybe be a little fruitful depending upon where you're at. But it's in the tech sector.
Yeah, so the tech sector, is banging. Tech sector is where all the money.
Interesting.
Big money in the tech sector right now. Big money. Always has been, and it's there.
So for clarity's sake, it's not really like an issue or a matter of, automation completely replacing jobs. It's just understanding where the demand for jobs are going to go.
That's exactly
versus how many people you have skilled to fill them.
That's where we are. You got to go where the jobs are. We're here, the Black Brain Trust, we're trying to turn people on and talk to people about where the opportunities are. The people that I'm mentoring right now from the channel, I'm not talking to anyone about who select what woman you talking about and all that bullshit. I'm talking about where are we with respect to your career? What are your goals? Let's make sure that we focus on a timely program. Let's get into these areas where we're going to actually get certified, move forward, put ourselves on a time, put ourselves on a clock, and meet our objectives every day. And let's push and move towards that, okay? Because the year goes by very fast, okay? 2 or 3 years go by very quickly, all right? So if you're very well focused, you're going to achieve a lot in in 24 and 36 months, and that could really put you dead square in the middle of the game where you're out there making greater than 50. You're out there making 60, 80, 100. Depending on what environments you get into. So we're about focusing on that. Let these other guys talk about,
This ain't doom and gloom. This is not doom and gloom.
All right.
No, it's not doom and gloom at all. It's about focus now. It's about being focused. It's about focusing our attention where we have to.
All right. Thank you all for joining us. Please hit the like button if not already done so. Share the video if possible. Hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, including those posted on the community tab. Also, document description beneath the video for you to reference. Peace and shalom.